So you've probably seen this weird, shaggy-looking mushroom popping up everywhere, right? It's called lion's mane, and it has absolutely exploded as the go-to supplement for boosting your focus, sharpening your memory, and even calming anxiety. But is it all just hype, or is there some real science behind this funky fungus? All right, let's get into it.
Here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with why it's so popular right now, then we'll trace its ancient history and unpack the actual science of how it's supposed to build a better brain. After that, we'll dig into the clinical evidence and finish up with what you really need to know before you even think about trying it.
So first things first, why is this mushroom suddenly having such a huge moment? Well, it turns out it taps directly into a very modern problem.
I mean, in a world where our phones are constantly buzzing and our to-do lists never end, who isn't looking for a way to cut through that brain fog? That promise of better focus and a little less anxiety is incredibly powerful, and it's exactly what put lion's mane on the map.
And you've definitely seen it. It's being called a natural nootropic, which is just a fancy word for something that can improve your cognitive function. And it's being sold as the key to unlocking mental clarity. This huge wave of popularity is exactly why it's so important to separate what the marketing says from what the science actually shows.
But here's the thing. This is not just some new wellness fad that popped up overnight. To really get what lion's mane is all about, we have to go way back. The story of this mushroom started centuries ago, long before it ever ended up in your morning coffee.
For centuries, healers in China and Japan were using this thing for everything from stomach problems to supporting overall health. Some of the old texts even said it was used to tranquilize the mind. Now, fast forward to today, and modern science is basically trying to figure out if those ancient healers were really onto something, with literally hundreds of studies now looking into its properties.
Okay, so this brings us to the really cool part. How is lion's mane supposed to actually work on the brain? Well, the answer seems to be inside some very unique compounds.
The mushroom's power seems to come down to two star players, hericenones and erinacins. Now, what makes these compounds so special is their size. They are just small enough to get past the blood-brain barrier, which is this super selective filter that protects your brain. This is huge, because it means they can actually get to where they need to go to have an effect.
So they get into the brain. Then what? Well, the leading theory is that they encourage your body to produce more of something called nerve growth factor, or NGF. And NGF is exactly what it sounds like. It's a critical protein our brains need to grow new neurons and keep the ones we already have healthy and strong.
This is honestly the best way to think about it. NGF is like fertilizer for your brain cells. It provides all the nourishment your neurons need to thrive, survive, and even form new connections. That process is called neurogenesis.
So here's how that proposed chain of events works. You take lion's mane, those key compounds get into the brain, they ramp up NGF production, and that NGF helps maintain and build a healthier, more resilient network of neurons. The main thing to remember here is that it's not the mushroom itself that's doing the heavy lifting, it's encouraging your own body to do it.
Okay, so that's the theory, and it sounds pretty good. But what does the actual human research say? This is where we have to separate the hype from the reality and really look at the data we have on anxiety, mood, and cognitive performance. This table gives us a really interesting snapshot from a study on young adults. Taking lion's mane led to faster reaction times on something called the Stroop task. That's a test that basically measures your ability to focus and ignore distractions. People also reported a significant drop in anxiety. Now, you'll see here the effect on acute stress just barely missed being statistically significant. That p-value of 0.051 just means the result was right on the edge of what scientists consider a sure thing, but the trend is definitely pointing in a very interesting direction.
And when we look at other studies, we start to see a pattern. A big Japanese study found that older adults with mild cognitive impairment actually saw their test scores improve. But, and this is a really big but, those improvements disappeared just a few weeks after they stopped taking it. This tells us that if there is a benefit, consistency is probably the most important thing.
And there's another totally fascinating angle here, the gut-brain axis. It turns out lion's mane is packed with these things called polysaccharides that act as prebiotics. Basically, they're food for the good bacteria in your gut. Your gut and your brain are in constant communication, so by supporting a healthy gut, you might be helping it produce more feel-good chemicals like serotonin, which is a completely different, sort of bottom-up way to potentially improve your mood.
Okay, so let's say your curiosity is piqued. If you're thinking about trying this stuff, what do you actually need to look for? Let's get into some practical advice for navigating the supplement aisle.
because it can be kind of confusing.
First off, you're going to see supplements made from either the fruiting body, which is the shaggy part you can actually see, or the mycelium, which is basically the root system. The fruiting body has more of those hericenones we talked about, while the mycelium has more erinacines. Both are important, but most experts and studies tend to focus on extracts from the fruiting body.
So when you're shopping, quality is everything. You want to look for a product that's made from 100% organic fruiting bodies. You also want to see that they used a dual extraction method. That just means they used both water and alcohol to pull out all the good stuff. And, most importantly, look for a brand that does third-party testing to prove it's pure and check if they list the amount of beta-glucans.
And what about safety? Well, for most people, lion's mane is considered very safe. The most common side effects are some mild digestive issues. But look, with any supplement, it is always a good idea to talk to your doctor before you start taking something new.
So, after all of that, what's the bottom line here? Lion's mane is a really fascinating fungus. It has a long, rich history and some genuinely promising modern research behind it. It really seems like it could be a useful tool for supporting our brains and our mood, but it is absolutely not a magic bullet.
This quote from a scientific review really just says it all perfectly. Lion's mane is not a replacement for standard medical care, especially if you're dealing with acute conditions. The best way to think about it is as a potential helper for the long-term management of things like anxiety and for just building a more resilient brain over time.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question. As the science on this keeps growing, you have to wonder, are we just scratching the surface here? Could fungi like lion's mane become a really important part of the future of mental and neurological health? I guess only time and a lot more research will tell.